really excited to have Sam Nelson with us today. Sam, how you doing?
Doing good. Really happy to be here, Randy.
Excellent. Happy to be here. I'm jealous. Not only do you have hair, you have blue hair. I should have had like a blue wig or something.
I know. I should probably explain that. Like 7 years ago or whatever, I did a spiff where I said I'd get blue hair if they beat a record. It was like a really small thing, but then it just became so valuable for my content and my brand that I kind of had to just keep going with it. And so now, like 7 years later, I'm still stuck with blue hair. Kind of weird, but it's like a practical business decision. It's not like kind of weird. I'm like the last dude that would have blue hair, but hey, pays the bills.
You go back to your college reunion, there's probably not too many blue hair would be my bet. And that's why I went bald. Besides, I didn't have a choice. But anyway, so Sam is the founder of two cool companies. One is SDRleader.com. Another one is a new one that he actually just announced today called Agoge Prospecting School. So we'll be talking about both of those. We're sponsored today by Phone Ready Leads, who was recently acquired by Apex Revenue. And Justin and Ryan are staying on, working with Joey and the team. So they're doing great. Phone Ready Leads is the audience activation sponsor of Sales Community, and a really cool company. Basically, on average, the pickup rate is like 5% if you're doing outbound cold calling, and they kind of swizzle their kind of formula, and people get results closer to 20 or 25%. So definitely check them out. And if you are a member of Sales Community, thanks. If you are not, Tucker will put on a link that you can join for free, salescommunity.com/winterfree. And Sam is one of our advisory board members as well. So thank you very much for that, Sam. So Sam lives in Seattle, Washington, has 4 kids under 7. So different stage of life. I've got 4 kids too, but they're all over 23. So
cool.
I can share some lessons learned with you if you like. And I said, besides work and family, what else? He goes, that's really it. So
right now, man, that's about all I got time for.
Obviously very, very dedicated and very loyal. We first met at a Dreamforce event, I think that Postal hosted during COVID a couple of years ago. And, besides the hair, I was definitely immediately drawn to Sam when we're talking, just his perspectives and outlook and what he does, a lot of which we'll get through today, was definitely very, very impressed with. So also Max from who Sam used to work with at Outreach was kind enough to give me some words as well. Max currently has a awesome VC fund called the GTM Fund. So Max says of Sam, a super hard worker, blue hair thing has really killed it for him. So it's not you, it's the blue hair that's killed it for you. Super memorable, and he really helped Outreach with sales and marketing, was an asset to Outreach, and had some very unique perspectives that helped the company on the go-to-market side. He has a street cred for having done the work job, and also has a great knack for teaching. We'll talk about the teaching thing later on as well. So jumping in here, maybe tell us, what was your first job after BYU?
Okay, well, actually, one thing I want to say about Max is Max came into Outreach, and he was in charge of marketing, and he was just so different than what I was used to. You get in the trenches, and I could work with Max, and I would bring Max like these crazy ideas, and he would say, "Go, done, approved. I'll pay you back. Just go do it." And it was really fun when he came in, because we would get stuff done, and he was willing to take risks, and it was a lot of fun to work with Max. So I feel really lucky to have been there at the same time as him.
Awesome.
Okay, my first job out of college was I started a company in college, and it was called Embral. And it was a very mission-driven company where basically what we did was we made it really easy for old people to record their life stories before they died. And we thought it would be a really cool thing and a really good thing for a lot of families. And it was very much a mission-focused company. It was like, you know what? Like every time we do this, it's a priceless thing for this family forever. And so the mission's good, and that's all that matters. Like everything will take care of itself. And it became very clear to me that like you can have the best mission in the world, but if you don't have a way to bring that to market sustainably, your impact is going to be orders of magnitude lower than if you get that part right. right? And so like I can have really great intentions, right? But unless your goal is just to be applauded for your intentions, like if you want to make a real impact on the world, you really need to make that into a sustainable company, and you need to understand go to market. And so that company, I sold it for a very not the $1 billion company that I hoped, but it became very clear that if I wanted to be successful in business, I needed to get really good at outbound prospecting, like generating new opportunities where there's previously nothing was the most important thing that I could do. Except, I mean, some people would say programming, and I think that that's true to an extent, but that wasn't what I was going to do. The most valuable thing for me was outbound prospecting. And so I just decided I'm going to go wherever I can learn that the best. And outreach was making a tool that was going to change the way people did outbound prospecting. And so I was like, wait, I could do outbound prospecting, selling to people whose whole world is outbound prospecting at a company that might change the way outbound prospecting is done. Sign me up. Like, I don't know if it was where my parents expected me to go, like out of kind of where I was in college, but it was the most important skill for me to develop. And so I was all in. And SDR seemed like something that I would have done for free just based on how it was clear to me it was a very important skill at starting my company.
Yeah. And then with outreach, that goes back those early days of outreach, right? Because that was about 2017.
Yeah. So like in the first group of SDRs in their headquarters, I was like the very first cohort there in Seattle.
Wow, that's awesome.
So no one had heard of it at that point.
There you go. So you started there, individual contributor, you got promoted up.
Yeah. So I was an SDR, and then it was really good. I was a top SDR, and then I became manager, and then I managed managers. And then during that time, outreach, they became a $1 billion company, and they were 89% cold outbound prospecting was how it was done. And at that time, that was very unusual. Usually, if you grow that quickly, it's not through outbound prospecting, but outreach had this tool that made it really effective. And so I published a lot of the things that we did in that process, a lot of our frameworks, and they turned out to work for other people too. And my content just exploded and grew way faster than I thought. And yeah, and then I spent kind of the last few years just kind of going on site to a bunch of different companies and just kind of advising people on outbound prospecting through a sales engagement platform.
Awesome. So you got kind of two different companies. So maybe first tell us about SDRleader.com.
Okay. So SDRleader.com is I think it may be the most niche community in SaaS, but it's only full-time SDR managers. So
and only SaaS.
Well, it skews towards SaaS.
Gotcha.
We got people from Experian, we got people from Apple, and from all over the place. It's becoming more popular, but the SaaS companies obviously start out with that kind of format, so that's more common. But it is, but yeah, it's only full-time SDR managers, no CMOs, no SDRs, no team leads. They're all full-time managers, and so I'm very strict with the vetting. I personally vet every person, but since we've done that, every time we do a dinner or a conference or a virtual meetup, everyone knows that everyone else there is an SDR leader. And so it's pretty fun and very, very good for people in that profession.
Awesome. That's great. So what do you actually do with it? How do you make money?
How I make money is we'll do events. So we'll do virtual meetups. And then I think I did 20 dinners last year across the country. And then we did the Pipeline Conference in November of last year. And then companies will sponsor it that want to get in front of SDR leaders.
Awesome. Really good. And then sounds like hot off the press today, Agoge. Maybe first tell us where the heck that name come from.
Okay. So where that name came from was when I was at Outreach, what we did was we segmented the SDR team into brand new reps and then more tenured reps. And so for the first 90 days, when I was first a manager, I would manage only the SDRs during their first 90 days. And so my whole world was taking SDRs that had zero experience, and the vast majority of the time they were right from college or had never had any relevant experience. The goal was to get them from that to ramped as quickly as possible. And I specialized in that part. And so by doing that, it freed up capacity for the other managers. And then I could also get really good at that one specific thing. And it worked really well, really, really well. And a lot of the frameworks that we used in that, like Agoge sequence, people may have heard of, or prioritization matrix, were just named after that kind of that team when I did it at Outreach. And so, but that's where it came from. And we stole it from Sparta. Sparta called their training program Agoge. We thought Sparta's cool. Let's call it that. So that's where the name Agoge came from.
Awesome. So Agoge is the actual real training facilitation for SDRs, BDRs, and then SDR leader is, just like the name is a community of SDR leaders.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's just strictly a community for SDR leaders, sdrleader.com. And then Agoge Prospecting School is just for kind of SDR enablement as a service, basically. And it's powered by sdrleader.com. Basically, like most SDR leaders are a member of that community. And so we have access to like all the best SDR leaders in the world. And so we'll have them do trainings, and then we have on-demand resources and things like that. So yeah, they work together.
That's awesome. So our title topic, appropriately enough, is winning outbound sequence strategies. And just as a lead-in, I have to give you lots of credit. So you actually presented at a Harvard Business School a couple months ago?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done that a few times. So
you don't think they would care? You think they got their head too far in the clouds to care anything, care at all about prospecting and outreach?
Well, you'd think that, but that's actually not true. Like they have a sales course that people can take, and it's the second most subscribed to one at Harvard Business School. And so there's actually a lot of demand for it. Maybe that wouldn't have been the case a few years ago, but I think as starting your own business becomes more popular of a path for students at Harvard Business School, sales is becoming much more desirable as something they want to understand. And so it is very, very popular, and the students are super excited about it. So, but yeah, like a few years ago, I would get random messages from people at Harvard Business School, and they said, "Hey, like your content was required reading for us, and we really liked it." And then eventually I got connected to the professor, and I said, "Hey, I'm happy to talk about it in person." And so I've gone there like 3 times and talked about how you do prospecting efficiently, especially when it's pure outbound.
Oh, that's great. And there's Mark Roberge, I know, is active there on some of the sales side too, right?
Yep, he's the professor there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And is there any discussion where they actually would consider starting off in sales themselves, or their egos allow them?
I don't know how many start off in sales. A lot of people that start off in sales kind of just like stay in, kind of start their own company from there. But
what a great idea, right? Okay, say you have this fancy HBS degree and all that stuff, but start the grassroots, go get a sales job for a year or two, and then go.
It's an interesting question. I wonder how many people do it. The thing is, I think
not many. I'll tell you.
Not many, but it's interesting is like I don't know what they do at Harvard Business School after they go out. I know a lot going to consulting and things like that. But like in my program in undergrad, I was in BYU's strategy program, which was the hardest one to get into there, right? It has 100% placement. It's the most desirable one. And very few wanted to go into sales, but I recruited a couple people from that program to go and be an SDR, which took some arm twisting and convincing. Yeah. And all of them were the top performers, and all of them have a salary that's got to be double what everyone else in that class has. Right. But it's just like they can kind of get a prestigious sounding job that they know is secure. And sometimes they just don't want to take the risk. But everyone I've seen that's just said, you know what, I'm going to take the risk because it's a valuable skill. I haven't met anyone who's done that and regretted it. Like not one.
Yeah. I mean, a whole different side note is just, sales in general at the college level, university level is still so, underwhelming, right? Just the number of schools that are offering the programs. Just you think about saying, how many people actually end up going into sales, especially the liberal arts major. Okay, well, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to do sales, right? They have no training for it.
Right.
Yeah, there are a bunch of schools that do have some great programs, and those students do really well. But anyway, so outbound sequence strategies. So one of the things you got to figure out is kind of who you're going to reach out to. How do you prioritize that, right?
Yep. And that's actually the most important thing. When people talk about outbound, the first thing people want to talk about is cold calling. Because at the end of the day, it all kind of depends on cold calling. Everything kind of gets you closer to a cold call. So I understand that. People want to talk about sequences. That's very important too. But the step that gets skipped in almost every company is really good enablement on who you align these sequences to in the first place, right? There's a lot, I guess there's a lot of focus on account-based things where they will prioritize certain accounts. And that's nice. But if you're not targeting the right people within the accounts, you'll waste a lot of time. And most companies don't do enablement for this. And most SDR teams are wasting most of their time on the wrong people because they skip that step at enablement. I'm not sure why that's so common, but that is a major problem. And so getting really clear on who the right people are to reach out to is critically important. And even the nuances in the titles, like you and I know, if you're in sales, like a sales director is different from a director comma sales or a director of sales. Like they all have different odds of being a rep versus a manager. Like they're all these tiny nuances that seem like really small details can completely derail an SDR if they're not trained on it. And so that's the biggest problem in outbound is really prioritizing titles.
And do you think
I almost wonder if like, well, I wonder if like marketing's not motivated to really prioritize titles and just kind of say, oh, it's from the right account, so it doesn't matter. And that's kind of what's caused some of these bad habits. But like prioritizing the right contact is the most important part of outbound, and no one's doing it. It's so crazy to me.
Yeah. All right. So let's take that tangent. You brought it up first. So, okay, marketing, right? So, how many times and there's some great ones out there, but by and large, I'll make a general statement, most aren't. So how many times is there a flawed system where marketing is based off of MQLs, right? Sales is based, and then there's a further on definition that's, an SQL, but usually gets blended in. Okay. So if you're if you're the front desk receptionist or the janitor, that's scored as much as somebody who's a CRO, right? And the sales given a choice that might count as three. No offense, three MQLs, but for sales, they just count that as one for the one CRO. So how much of this do you think is a flawed metric system with marketing, and then this undue pressure on numbers that are the quantity numbers, not necessarily the quality?
Yeah, and I do have like some empathy for marketing because like the CEO will like give them some mandate and it's like, well, how do we even measure this? And it changes like every quarter. So like, I do understand that it's really hard, but for me, like if we cold call a rep at a company and we get a meeting with them, we don't get paid. We've just wasted a ton of time. The AE gets mad at us. And if you keep doing that, you're going to lose your job. Right. And so, like in marketing, they can get away with that a lot more for whatever reason. And I'm not familiar with marketing. I don't know. All I know is for me, like in sales development, it is all about getting a meeting held between the account executive and the right person. Nothing else matters. Yep. That is it. And when I was an SDR manager, I was like, you can do that through cold calling. But there are some other initiatives where we could get 100% attributable meetings between the AE and the right person. And I would do these dinners, some things that I'm doing now with SDRleader.com, these dinners, or we would send SDRs to go to trade shows, to go to the booths where the decision makers would be and set meetings there. And so my focus has always been, how do we get a meeting held between the account executive and the right person? And just focused only on that aspect of marketing. And what I found is like, if you do that, like a lot of the other stuff kind of takes care of itself. Like I'm not a marketing person, but that's the niche of marketing that I find really valuable. And it's also very indisputable too. Like if you get fully attributable meetings with people, it's very valuable.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I guess, mechanically has to do that. What's the relationship with the sales leader and the marketing leader, and you're making sure they do have kind of violently aligned priorities as opposed to dysfunctional ones.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep. And then kind of, hidden throughout here, we're talking about sequencing, but why don't you maybe explain a little bit, what does sequencing mean to you?
Okay. Yeah. So most important part of outbound, or at least the part that if you don't get right, nothing else matters, is prioritization. So we talked about that, but assuming that you're aligning the right prospects to sequences or aligning your efforts to the right prospects, a very efficient way to reach out to them properly is through a sequence. And what a sequence is it's a series of kind of reach out attempts and you make a blueprint for it, and you have it in your outreach or whatever platform you use, and you can align an important person to that, and outreach will just kind of queue up tasks for you to do, and everyone will be reached out to. No one will fall through the cracks in the right sequence of events.
Yep. And by reach outs, are you talking about phone, email, text, video? What do you think about for that?
The proper phrase would be touch points. And so it's like phone or email or LinkedIn touch. You set that up, and then you can align people to that series of touch points.
Gotcha. And maybe a bad example just because it's so easy, but say for you, if you're going to be reaching out to a SDR leader that you don't know, then kind of what would be your timing of the different sequences, and what would you do first? Do you wait a week? Do you wait 2 days? And kind of what do you do, or how do you do? Knowing that obviously I would think you got fish are jumping in the boat because your value prop and what you do is so compelling. So say if it was somebody who wasn't that aware or maybe a little bit stuck in the mud.
Yeah, totally. So there are a lot of details and nuances with the exact timing of the steps and everything. Like if you look up, if you just Google Agoge sequence, you can see what the whole framework looks like. But on a high level, the whole strategy of the Agoge sequence is you will do personalization up front at the very beginning and in the part of the email where it matters, which is the first couple of lines. That's what they see before they open the email. And then a sequence can allow you to leverage that 10 different times, right? So you'll do follow-up emails to that first email, and you can reference that customization that you did on the 7 different phone calls that you do, or on your LinkedIn touch. And so what sequences can allow you to do is you can do customization or personalization, but you can leverage it to a much greater extent without having to redo research. It makes it very, very easy. And so, but yeah, so you do personalization up front and then benefit from it throughout the rest of the sequence.
Awesome. And then I guess you go through different exercises really in an effort to, I'll say, get the fish on the hook, right? To get them to respond. But then once somebody responds, then kind of what's the thought process from there?
Yeah, you want to get a meeting scheduled with the account executive. So you want to get them to show to a meeting. If an SDR can do that, if they can get meetings held between the right people and the account executives, they will be fine. There's lots of other details and lots of other cool things about it, but at its core, that is what you are trying to do. So anything that's not getting you closer to meetings held with the right people is probably not a good use of time. But yeah, and usually, like sometimes you'll get email responses, but when you get an email response, the best response to pretty much every email is a phone call, right? They have their phone number in the signature. That's often not picked up by data providers, and so you want to just immediately call them after that. If you can't get through to them, you can send them an email, but the sequence really sets you up to get through to them on the phone and get that initial meeting set.
Awesome. And then from there, then SDR has pretty much done their job, right? And then they go off and kind of just filter more of those, and the reps then are really charged with running with that, correct?
Yeah. Most companies, once you've got the meeting set with the account executive, you let the account executive take it from there.
Yeah.
And some companies try to have the SDRs take like a second call right there. But that often does more harm than good, because even if you build a relationship with the SDR, then it becomes more and more awkward to pass it off. Why can't the AE just, if it's qualified, just take the first 5 minutes to do that? And so yeah, that's kind of a good line to draw, is just like once you have got the meeting scheduled with the right person, that's a good time to pass it to the AE.
Yeah. And I'm going to lead the witness here a little bit, but do you get feedback from the SDRs that say, geez, my reps take a while to follow up, or they follow up and they're sloppy, and I know this is a great lead, and I'll just say their sales basics is sloppy? Do you get feedback like that at all?
Oh, from the AEs?
No, from the SDRs. The SDR says, hey, I'm giving you Sam, I'm giving you a great lead, but then the rep doesn't do a good job of following up.
Yes, that definitely happens. But the thing is, like, if you say, hey, SDR, it's your job until this holds with the AE, then they can't really blame the AE for anything there. But sometimes once they have the meeting, like, they'll forget to set a next step, and they'll say, oh, shoot, I forgot to set next step. Yeah. So you don't get credit for this. And it's like, bro, you could just ask for the next step. And so like that can create some tension sometimes.
Yeah. So I do a weekly post, which is I might be old school, and it's just all real time stuff. And I'll submit that. I mean, I was, we call them telemarketers, we didn't call them SDRs, but I was that, way back when, probably before your parents were born. But when I was at EMC, so we started in 1985. But we do the SDR thing. We pass it to the reps, and the reps we knew were on it. They did everything. But today, just the sales cycle and sales sloppiness, I see people take too long. They don't follow up. There's one I had the other day where somebody's doing a pilot, and all of a sudden, I have it teed up through my executive introduction that I do to the CROs. The CRO at the company passes down, the company works it, and all of a sudden, they did a pilot, which I didn't know, and all of a sudden, I get called in. Okay, Randy, a pilot ended a week ago. We did it for a month, and we're not getting an order. I'm like, well, what was your pilot plan? Did you have a test plan? Did you have performance criteria? Did you talk about them having money, what the decision-making process is? Like, well, no, we just did it. I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. So these poor SDRs these days are getting great leads. Ultimately, some of their measurement is, okay, does that convert to something? Doesn't convert, then they end up getting hosed, right? For lack of better words.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. And I should have said earlier, so we have from a LinkedIn user a question or comment here. So Tucker, if you can pull it. And definitely, so anybody that's listening along, watching along, you can see us or hear us. We can't see you, but definitely post away here. We got some great expert here with Sam. Sam, some great food for thought here. Question, your opinion, how does one go about uniquely personalizing across different touch points despite so little being available publicly?
Okay, great question. So the first thing I would say is
there's a lot available, but anyway, go ahead.
What? There's what?
A lot available, I think, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I would say, how does one go about personalizing uniquely across the different touch points? I would say, don't personalize uniquely across the different touch points. And the reason for that is so like in a sequence, there will be 6 emails. If you personalize each one of those emails uniquely, the number of people you can reach out to decreases by about 6x. And so you can reach out to 6x fewer people. And there are once you do personalization once, like there are diminishing returns every time you do it. And I would say I would do personalization in that first email, and then you use everything you have available to you in a sequence to reuse that without taking extra time. So there are bump emails. They're controversial, but they do work, and they've worked for a very long time. You can resurface those to yourself on your own calls.
Yeah, so explain that, bump emails.
Yeah, so bump emails is, so you're going to do your first email that's personalized with the best you can do with personalization. And then after a few days, if they don't respond, there will be another email that says, hey, just wanted to make sure you got this, or something of that nature. Okay. And the results for that in almost every case are going to be stronger than that first email that was time consuming where you did the personalization. And then you can actually run that exact same play again, and you will still get stronger results than your initial email that you spent the time on. And some people don't like that, but in reality, that's just how humans communicate. Like if you send an email to someone and they don't respond, you don't send a completely new email with changing the subject. You just say, hey man, just want to draw your attention to this again. And that tends to work really well. So you can benefit from personalization multiple times without requiring extra time spent. And sometimes there's a lot available, sometimes there's less, it kind of varies. But in any case, you want to find the very best that you can and do that in the first email. And that's it. Like if you try to do that again, you're going to get your second best personalization. You're taking twice as much time per person, and it's not worth it because of the diminishing returns. So just do it once with the best you can do. And also, the other thing that's important about that first email is the most important thing is actually proof of human to the extent that you can. You want to look like an actual person. That's the one advantage that you have as a rep that marketing that's doing millions of blasts doesn't have, is you can start it with I, you can act like a real person. And that's what you want to focus on when you write that first email. So a lot of feedback, but for this particular question, I kind of have to touch on all of those different things because it all works together.
Yeah, great question. So whoever did that, thanks. Anybody else, feel free to chime in. So I'm older school, obviously. So I'll have debates sometimes with the companies I'm working with where, there's this kind of supposed new age, and if you disagree with me here, totally fine. But there's this new age thing where, okay, you're going to do that first reach out, and it's going to be kind of thought provoking, which is, hey, we've got a great tool for, whatever, AI sales or some just kind of this generic thing. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, if you don't really say what you do, if you don't say kind of what you do, what your value is, do you already have some good, impressive customer names? To me, having, you don't want to have it be too long, but if you've got, whatever, 4 or 5 bullets explaining a little bit more what you do, what your value prop is, how you help, you have for customers, then to me, it's easier for somebody then to respond and say, okay, I get it. Yeah, I'm interested in that. Would be how I would approach it. But some people disagree with me. They say, oh, no, you should just have like a one-liner to try and prompt them. What school are you?
I am of the school of like, you want to get them to open the email, and maybe we do disagree on this. I would say like proof of human gets them to open the email. Yep. And so I think the first line really needs to be, this is what they see in their inbox before they click on it. If it looks like it's from another human, people are just more likely to click on it. And yep. So in my opinion, you want to prove that you're a human first. That's the one advantage you have over marketing, and they're getting hundreds of emails from marketing blasts. So you want to do that. And then after that, you want to clearly describe what you do in the shortest amount of space possible. Just needs to be clear, and it needs to be short. One more thing I'll add on this is a lot of times your CEO is used to pitching to VCs. And when they pitch to VCs, they're saying, hey, we're going to take over the whole world. We actually do this, 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 and this. Yeah. And they don't want to just simply say what the most compelling value prop is, because it's a different pitch deck. So a lot of times, like the CEO will say, this is our messaging, go forth and do it. And it's like, oh, it becomes so bland that it's this platform that uses AI to do everything you can think of, that it just gets no attention. And so short and specific and clear is the goal after you try to get them to open the email.
Gotcha. And then what about, say if it's a company they haven't heard of before, which would be the case with probably most SaaS companies, including kind of align with some of the, say, 4 or 5 customer names to help add credibility that they know it's just not some fly-by-night startup.
It depends on who you're selling into. Like if you're selling into SaaS, people don't care as much about that anymore. Like a lot of these companies are only a few years old anyway. Some of them that are like making 100 million in sales, and so like a lot of them are a lot more open to betting on newer companies. And so doing proof of like dropping your customers in the first email, I don't know if it's as important for like newer SaaS companies. For companies that have been around for longer and bigger companies, that can matter more. But for SaaS companies, like most people don't even put that in, because people, if you can solve the problem, they'll get interested. Gotcha.
And you said a few times, kind of look like a human. So can you talk a little bit more about, obviously know what it is, but can you talk a little bit more about any other kind of tricks or ways you can do it?
Yeah. So and I would say 90% of people disagree with me on this, but I keep sticking with it because it's true. Like if you start your emails with I, it works better. And the reason for that, like that's not true in other parts of the sales cycle. And I think that's why everyone else disagrees with me. Like you don't want to make it about yourself in almost every part of sales, but in the first line of an email, in those first 5 words that someone sees in their inbox before they decide to click on the email or not, if you start it with I, it presupposes that it's coming from an individual. And marketing blasts can't do that. So this is like the one secret that you have as a rep that other people can't do, is starting with I. It presupposes that this is a one-to-one communication, and people just are wired to respond to one-to-one communications. And so, I would keep it really simple and say, starting with I when you write emails. A lot of people try to just like omit I and just do bad grammar, but it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with the fact that this is a one-to-one communication. That's what gets people to open emails.
Oh, awesome. And we have from Neeraj, hopefully I pronounced that right. Sorry if I didn't. Sounding like a real human, rings so true to me, but do you think some people might prefer the more analytical pitch while some focus on the impact of the pitch? So you answered that a little bit, but maybe.
Yeah, I would say no. Like people so there are two goals. One is you want to get them to open the email. So the first 5 words get them to open the email. You're not going to be able to give them a clear, complete analytical approach in the first 5 words of the email. You want to use that to get them to open it. And then you can give them a really clear, short description of the value that you provide after that. So I would say you're not wrong, but the first 5 words of the email is a different goal.
Got it. And then kind of with all the changes now in email and, harder to break through, do you have any kind of tips or tricks there? And then is then the phone going to be on a kind of new resurrection as a increasing and, an outreach tool?
Yeah. Okay. So I want to say this is the last thing I want to say about email, because I think that actually like the last mile, like 90% of meetings actually do get set over the phone, but I always get a lot of questions about email and I'm happy to answer them, but I don't want people to mistake that for me thinking that email is overly important. Like, the last thing I'll say about email with all of the changes is like everyone was freaked out because they thought that Google is going to block every single business from doing outbound forever. And it turned out to not happen. Like, unless you're reaching out to individuals, which very few companies that have an outbound team are doing, like those rules that everyone was worried about a couple months ago just don't apply. They changed the rules. That said, like emails are a minor part of what makes an outbound team work. Like sometimes they can get a reply, and the most important part of that reply is going to be the phone number in the bottom of that reply. So it's a fine thing to do. And actually, like even the personalization at the very beginning, where you're going to start with, I saw that, and like something unique about them. The most valuable part of doing that research is that it's going to be available to you when you make the call. And so we do email in the beginning, but we want to automate as much as possible of that, because ultimately all this does is get you closer to a call. And if you're doing it right, 80, 90% of your meetings are going to actually be set over the phone. Very few meetings are actually set over email. And if most of your meetings are set over email, I got a secret for you. You can be the top performer at your company by simply switching to the phone. And I see this all the time. So I would say, yeah. So that's my opinion about email. Phone is going to be where you become the top performer, though, in almost every case.
Gotcha. And when you say phone, that's inclusive of text.
I honestly don't have a lot of experience with text. Some companies are paranoid about doing it. I think it's cool. And I've heard of people having a lot of success with it. When I was in the trenches, they were afraid of doing it. And so I wasn't allowed to. And so I don't have a lot of firsthand experience to go with there. But I would say certainly calling people on the phone is very effective for getting meetings set.
Awesome. That's great. And we have our sponsor, Phone Ready Leads, and they can help make sure the hit rate, more people pick up faster, I guess. Now, what about if you think about this up on Sequence and you're, in your SDR school? So certainly lots of great best practices that you've mentioned, but from an SDR perspective, any kind of 2 or 3 common mistakes or flaws that you see?
Yeah. So the most important ones are, one is prioritizing the wrong people. I talked about that a ton already, but it's the number one problem. Easiest thing to fix, number one problem. So any managers out there, you can fix that and make a huge difference really quick and seem really smart. Okay. The second one is they are reluctant to pick up the phone. And as a manager, the way that you fix that is you just like don't even give them oxygen to do that. Like when they first start out, you only make sequences with calls available. You never give them the experience of doing only email.
Right.
Call reluctance is one of the number one problems among teams and new SDRs. You can get prioritization right and be willing to make calls. And then lastly, when you're making calls, you want to ask for the meeting early and often. And a lot of times they try to shoehorn too much discovery into a cold call. And while that can be good practice for a discovery call, when you have more time and more breathing room and they've agreed to a 30-minute meeting, that's fine. But excellent practices for a discovery call can totally ruin you in cold calls. Cold calls, your job is to get a meeting. You only want to do things that get you closer to a meeting held. And you don't want to waste breath on anything else.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic if you're a SDR and you don't like doing up on calls, like being a firefighter, not you don't want to hold the hose or something.
Yeah, it's just like some companies, they just like and this is where it happens most commonly is like companies with big brands where they get tons of inbound, like the reps that are successful are the ones that, kind of like, send emails out to leads and like mark territory and things like that. That's a lot of time where the culture starts. But like if you can make the switch to calling, it just makes such a big difference so fast.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just got to, I guess in a sick way, back when we did it, just think about, so when we didn't have LinkedIn, you didn't even have internet, you didn't have, all this stuff where you had to go through, you basically had to talk your way through the, administrator or the person in the front desk to then get to the person to then get through. And now all the tools and everything that people have available, I'm like, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. It's crazy. But anyway, so when we were prepping, you had a great line, which is those that aren't good at doing oftentimes end up teaching, which is obviously wrong for a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah, this is the one where I was like, it might be too controversial to bring up, but this is definitely an opinion that rubs some people the wrong way. I guess we'll talk about it. So one thing that's really common, like they say, there's that phrase that says those that don't do teach. And it's like kind of funny. And it's like, hey, it's kind of true. Like if you go to school, like a lot of times the people that are teaching, maybe teaching certain subjects weren't the best at practical application at those things. And I actually think that that's fine. Like if someone is exceptional at teaching math, but they're not really good at practical application of the principles in a way that's economically viable, like that's fine. Like those facts are established, and if someone's really good at teaching those established facts, then that can be a good thing. And so I don't think that everyone who teaches needs to be a really good doer of it, but that same philosophy sometimes can bleed into sales, where someone who's not a good rep, but they really like them, they say, you know what, you've got a real skill in teaching. Why don't you just teach? That can create some issues because just because someone is a good teacher does not mean that teaching is a good thing for them to do. In sales, a lot of times, like the facts aren't 100% clearly established. And if you're a mediocre performer, but a fantastic teacher, what can happen a lot of times is someone can be fantastic at teaching strategies that make someone mediocre. And so it's just something that people need to be careful of in sales. Like it's almost like people accept it as gospel that people who are top performers can't teach and that they're just different skill sets. But I haven't seen that to be true at all. Like the top performing SDRs that want to go into management are insanely good managers. They're insanely good teachers. Like there's occasionally the lone wolf that doesn't care, sure. But if you want to isolate like the very best teachers in the world, they're not mediocre practitioners.
Yep, absolutely. And so you've had some great mentors along the way. Any one or two in particular and advice that you've received?
Yeah, I would say, so when I was at Outreach, if you're at Outreach, when I was at Outreach, it was like the coolest sales tech platform that there was, and attracted a lot of really great sales leaders. And so I feel really fortunate. Like I could probably point to any one of the AEs or people that I worked with as being really phenomenal. I will say there was one rep that I worked with that at Outreach named Riley Devine, who is really, really good. And I didn't even interact with him that much, but every time he would talk, I was like, wow, like this guy really is willing to say things that people aren't supposed to say that are totally true. And I really appreciate every time he spoke. He might be a good person to have on this, by the way. He doesn't do a lot of content, but it would be very valuable. But I'm really close with a lot of the AEs back from when I was at Outreach. I like Craig Hanahan. I still work with him, and I reached out to him the other day to ask for advice on a big deal I'm working on. Philip Boken, an AE that I worked with, we still talk like every few weeks. And so I think there is like a really cool opportunity to really build relationships with the account executives that you work with as an SDR. And there's a lot you can learn from those guys. I learned a lot from all the A's that I worked with today at Outreach.
Awesome. That's great. And then for kind of a sales leader or CEO, any kind of one or two in particular that have stood out to you?
I mean, Mark Costaglo is just like, he's a legend, right? Like Outreach was pretty small. Mark Costaglo came in and everything changed after he came in. And it's not like he had, I mean, his background was unusual. He was like selling sunglasses for a while. I don't know it perfectly, but he was selling, it sounded like he was selling hard products, which sometimes people that have a lot of experience in SaaS don't have that. And I wonder if that was part of it. But Mark Hosseglow really was, he is a legendary person at selling and also manager. And the other thing that I, just from my seat as an SDR, is he had the respect of everyone. Like Mark Hosseglow, even AEs that didn't like anyone, everybody respected Mark Hosseglow. And I think that says a lot, because a lot of times, and it wasn't like they had a softball like sales team where they accepted poor performance. That was not Outreach's culture. Still, people really respected him, and he's a legend. So Mark Hosseglow, as far as sales leaders go.
Awesome.
It's really good. Great. Oh, dude, I got to say one more is Steve Ross. Steve Ross was he was my manager from my first cold call to when I left and started SDRleader.com. And I like went off on my own and started my own thing and no longer have to have a boss. I went and hired him as my boss again, just to report to every couple of weeks. He's really phenomenal as well.
Awesome.
Steve Ross is awesome.
That's great. Any advice you'd give to your younger self?
So my younger self is like, when I'm looking for jobs, like I'm so glad that I went into sales. It wasn't the one that, compared to other options, that parents really always want to point you to, but it's so valuable. It's so practical. If you ever want to start a business, it's the best thing to do. So going into sales, I'm glad that I took that advice, but it wasn't really obvious at that point. Also working extremely hard really early in your career. May not be fashionable. There's lots of viral posts about not working hard and how it doesn't matter, but it isn't true. Like if you were like the secret to work-life balance is front loading a lot of your work really early in your career and making a name for yourself early on. That compounds over time. And the best way to have work-life balance is just work insanely hard the first 5 years of your career.
Yes. Or yes, 10 or 15
or more, at the very least 5. But like you can work 5 years. Like there's the phrase that says work 5 years like no one else will and live the next 50 like no one else can. And I would strongly recommend doing that instead of just like skating by and being the lazy man that works the hardest.
Yeah. So why do you think, so we're different generations roughly, right? So why do you think that is? So when I was coming up, it was whatever, 1985, I was 22, 23, whatever. And the only thing we knew was you're going to bust your ass, till you're 30 and 35. And, then you're in a leadership position and you got to lead by example. But kind of what happened there, do you think, with the work ethic?
I don't know. I think a lot of people get, it's common for people to get advice from social media. And the problem and there's some cool parts about that. Like you have access to, people and advice from people that you never would have otherwise had, but you also have like a lot of mediocre advice that gets really popular among most people. Most people are not top performers, right? Most people are average or worse. And so like the most viral content is the content that is appealing to people who are average or worse. And so content that people want to be true that isn't really true always goes viral. And if you if you don't discriminate between who's giving the advice and kind of go off what's popular, you're going to get a lot of not good advice that just happens to be popular among low performers. And so you have to be careful there. But I wonder if that's part of it. Like, and for an influencer, like if you want to be popular, you talk about how you don't have to work hard. But no dad gives that advice to their son, right? So like people who really care will give the real advice. And so you have to be careful about people who are incentivized to give advice that's popular and not true.
Yeah. So full disclosure, I see Neeraj here, just same name, but the CEO at Wayfair I know well. A couple weeks ago, basically did an internal note and he got around about, basically, hey, everybody's got to work harder, right? And he got lambasted. I should have probably put something on LinkedIn. I didn't, but I, kind of sent him a private note just saying, hey, I'm in violent agreement, and most successful leaders out there are in violent agreement. But given this crazy culture these days, you kind of can't say, go work harder. I had Tom Hannigan on, and I think it was November, December. He's runs North America, America's at Service now, but he's, similarly all about, come in early, get ready, crank out your calls, what you're going to do at night. You got to do your notes, your follow-ups, and you got to get ready for tomorrow. And that's something a lot of leaders won't say in this day and age. But anyways, I'm going to move on. Yeah. So we're just about the end here. We had a bunch of different topics we didn't get to. But what about in terms of kind of just general lead generation, right? Obviously, we talked about sequencing, outreach. Any other things that come into play in terms of, getting that funnel going?
Well, I want to say like one unusual turn I took in my career that ended up being really valuable for me was I did like some extracurricular projects that were, maybe you could say they would maybe traditionally fall under marketing. But when I was an SDR manager. And so I was an SDR manager, and I did like a couple of initiatives where we would do dinners, and we would get the right people to dinner, and we would spend 3 hours with them in person, and those would convert to leads very, very well. Or like I said before, we would send SDRs to trade shows. Like when I was an SDR, I spent a couple $1,000s, which was a lot of my net worth at the time, to go to the expo hall at one of the big cybersecurity conferences. And I told my boss that it had been approved, and I told my AE it had been approved, or I told him I had the budget for it. I didn't lie. The budget came from me. But anyway, I ended up going, and I spent maybe a couple $1,000s, but we closed 50,000. And then of course, after that, I got approval to get that reimbursed and go again. And it worked every single time. And so, then eventually that just became like a strategy that we did. So like, I actually think that SDR leaders are really good at coming up with ways to generate leads in contexts that you would traditionally think are marketing. But marketing they've got to worry, they're thinking about brand, they're thinking about the random new tangent that the CEO wants to go on. Generating pipeline actually I don't think it has as much to do with whether they get fired or not as people think. But for SDR leaders, all they really care about is generating pipeline. So if you like give SDR leaders like a small little slush fund of a few $1,000s and say, hey, here's a few $1,000s. I want you to try and find ways to generate new meetings from this. I think people will be pleasantly surprised. When I did that at Outreach, it was extremely effective, like extremely effective.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I think that's an opportunity for a lot of people that's slept on right now.
Oh, awesome. Well, time flies when you're having fun. You've been fantastic. Sam Nelson, SDRleader.com, and the brand new Agoge Prospecting School. So go check that out. Thank you so much. Next week, not next week, sorry, this Wednesday, we had to reschedule Sam from last week to today. So we have Dave Schneider on Wednesday, who was longtime CRO and then president at ServiceNow. Now he is at a VC firm and is on the board of Zscaler and a bunch of other great companies. And his general topic is lessons learned. So there'll be a lot of great things there. So again, for those that are members, sales community, thanks. For those that aren't, you can get a free link here. And as always, we have Tucker behind the scenes who does a great job. So thank you so much, Tucker. And Sam, thanks so much. Look forward to continuing to watch your success. And I'm sure we'll think of some ways to tag team.
All right. Thanks so much, Randy.
All right. Have a good one.